The sound of splintering wood and crushing metal at 6:30 a.m. is not how anyone wants to start their Tuesday. But there I was, standing on my front porch in my pajamas, staring at what used to be my mailbox scattered across, the lawn like confetti at a demolition party. The familiar white SUV was already disappearing around the corner, leaving behind tire tracks in my flower bed, and the echo of maniacal laughter that could only belong to one pair of people in this entire neighborhood, Nancy and Barbara, the Karen sisters. This was mailbox number 4 in 3 months, and I was done playing defense. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started, because trust me, it gets worse before it gets better. The twins moved into the house across the street about 6 months ago, and from day one, they were like a natural disaster in matching floral print. Nancy was the older one by 12 minutes, which she reminded everyone about constantly, as if those 12 minutes gave her some kind of divine authority over the universe. Barbara was the follower, always nodding along and recording everything on her phone, like she was documenting evidence for some future lawsuit. Both women were in their mid-40s, identical in every obnoxious way possible. Same bleached blonde hair, same oversized sunglasses perched on their heads like crowns, same nasal voices that could cut glass. They drove everywhere in this massive white Escalade that they'd nicknamed the Beast. And they treated every street in our quiet cul-de-sac like their personal NASCAR track. The first time they hit my mailbox, I actually gave them the benefit of the doubt. Accidents happen, right? It was just a light tap that knocked it slightly crooked. I straightened it out, tightened the bolts, and went about my day like a reasonable human being. The second time, I started to wonder. The mailbox post was completely snapped in half, and there were deep tire tracks leading right up to it and then veering back onto the road. When I knocked on their door to ask about it, Nancy answered, wearing a lime green muumuu covered in pink flamingos. "Oh, that old thing?" she said, not even trying to look sorry. "Maybe you should get a sturdier one, or put it somewhere safer." "It's exactly where the city installed it when I moved in," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. Barbara appeared behind her sister, phone already recording. "Are you accusing us of something?" she asked with this sickeningly sweet smile. "Because that sounds like harassment to me." I walked away before I said something I'd regret, but I should have known right then that this wasn't about accidents or poor driving. This was personal. The third incident happened on a Saturday morning while I was mowing the lawn. I heard the roar of their engine getting louder and louder, followed by a tremendous crash. When I looked up, my mailbox was completely obliterated, and the Beast was speeding away with Nancy behind the wheel, arm hanging out the window giving me a little wave. That's when I knew I was dealing with something beyond normal neighborly disputes. These women had declared war on my mailbox, and by extension on me. I tried the official channels first. I filed a complaint with the HOA, thinking surely reasonable adults would put a stop to this nonsense. The response was about as helpful as a chocolate teapot. "We encourage neighbors to work out their differences amicably," they said. Work it out amicably? They were using my mailbox for target practice. Next, I called the police. Officer Martinez showed up, took one look at the wreckage, and shook his head. "Unless you can prove it was intentional," he said, "this is really more of a civil matter. Get a camera if you're that concerned." So I got a camera. Actually, I got 3 cameras. Motion-activated, night vision, the works. I was going to catch these lunatics in the act, and then we'd see how civil this matter really was. I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, at exactly 7:15 a.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. I pulled up the live feed just in time to watch Nancy line up the Beast from halfway down the street, rev the engine like she was at the starting line of the Indy 500, and plow straight into mailbox number 5 with the precision of a guided missile. The impact was spectacular. Wood exploded everywhere. The metal post went flying into my neighbor's yard. And through it all, I could hear them laughing. Actually laughing. Barbara was hanging out the passenger window with her phone, recording the whole thing like it was some kind of YouTube prank video. I saved the footage and marched straight back to the HOA office. This time I had evidence. Crystal clear, high-definition evidence of premeditated mailbox murder. "Well," said Mrs. Henderson, "the HOA president, after watching the video twice, this is certainly concerning, but we still think it's best if neighbors try to resolve these issues directly." I stared at her. "You just watched them deliberately destroy my property and laugh about it. What exactly am I supposed to resolve?" She shuffled some papers uncomfortably. "Perhaps if you spoke with them again? Sometimes people don't realize how their actions affect others." Oh, they realized? They just didn't care. I confronted Nancy and Barbara the next day as they were unloading groceries. Both were wearing identical yellow sundresses covered in cartoon bees, because apparently matching outfits were part of their sisterly bond. "We need to talk about my mailbox," I said, holding up printed screenshots from the video. Nancy barely glanced at them. "I don't know what you're talking about." "It's right here," I said, pointing to the image of her face behind the windshield. "That's you driving straight into my mailbox while your sister films it." Barbara piped up without looking up from her grocery bags. "That could be anyone. White SUVs all look the same." "It's your license plate number," I said. "Photoshop," Nancy replied with a straight face. "Anyone can fake those things nowadays." I felt my jaw clench. "It's a video. With audio. I can hear you laughing. Deep fake," Barbara added helpfully. "Very sophisticated stuff. You must have spent a fortune." The sheer audacity was breathtaking. They were gaslighting me while standing in front of the evidence, wearing matching bee costumes like some kind of suburban nightmare. "Look," Nancy said, stepping closer with that condescending smile that I was starting to hate more than anything on earth. "Maybe if you didn't put your mailbox in such a stupid place, people wouldn't keep hitting it. It's in the exact same spot where every other mailbox on this street is located," I replied. "Well, maybe everyone else is stupid too," Barbara chimed in. "Did you ever think of that?" That night, I sat in my garage, staring at the pile of wood and metal that used to be my fifth mailbox in 3 months. The security footage was playing on repeat on my laptop, Nancy lining up her shot. The moment of impact, their faces, twisted with glee as they drove away from the destruction. I was tired. Tired of replacing mailboxes. Tired of dealing with their games. Tired of getting no help from anyone in authority. But mostly, I was tired of being the victim in their twisted little reality show. That's when I started researching indestructible mailboxes. Turns out, there's a whole community of people who've dealt with mailbox vandals, and they've gotten creative. Steel posts anchored in concrete foundations. Mailboxes built like bunkers. Some people even embedded theirs in solid. Rock 1 forum post caught my attention. "Built mine out of 4-inch. Steel pipe filled with concrete. Last idiot who tried to run it over totaled his truck. Haven't had a problem since." I screenshot that post and stared at it for a long time. Then I started shopping for steel. The next morning, I drove to the industrial supply yard on the other side of town. The guy behind the counter took one look at my specifications and grinned. "Mailbox troubles?" he asked. "You could say that." "Well, this'll fix 'em. 6-foot steel post, 4-inch diameter, 3 feet going into reinforced concrete. Whatever hits this thing is gonna lose." I bought everything I needed and then some. Steel post, rebar, concrete mix, industrial-grade mailbox, mounting hardware that could probably hold up a small building. The total came to almost $800, but it was worth every penny for what I had in mind. Waited until the weekend to install it. Saturday morning, I started digging. 3 feet down, 18 inches across, perfectly centered where my original mailbox had stood. Nancy and Barbara were on their porch, watching me work and whispering to each other like a couple of scheming witches. "What you building there, neighbor?" Nancy called out in that fake sweet voice. "Just a mailbox," I replied without looking up. "Looks like overkill to me," Barbara added. "You planning to mail elephants?" I ignored them and kept digging. The hole had to be perfect. Everything depended on it. By Sunday afternoon, I had poured the concrete foundation and set the steel post. The whole assembly weighed close to 400 pounds and was anchored deeper than some small buildings. The mailbox itself looked perfectly normal from the outside, just a standard black metal box with a red flag. But underneath, It was mounted to a steel plate that could probably stop a tank. Monday morning came and went without incident. So did Tuesday. By Wednesday, I was starting to wonder if maybe the sight of all that construction had finally gotten through to them. Maybe they'd realized that their little game was over. I should have known better. Thursday morning at 6:47 a.m., my phone exploded with motion alerts. I grabbed it and pulled up the camera feed. Just in time to see the beast coming down the street at full speed. Nancy hunched over the wheel with that same manic expression I'd seen so many times before. But this time was different. This time I was ready. The impact was beautiful. I know that sounds wrong, but after months of watching these women destroy my property and laugh about it, there was something deeply satisfying about watching the beast meet its match. Nancy hit my mailbox dead center at what must have been 25 miles per hour. The front end of the SUV crumpled like an accordion. The hood buckled. Steam erupted from the radiator. The windshield spiderwebbed. And through it all, my mailbox stood perfectly still, without so much as a scratch on the paint. The beast rolled backward about 10 feet and came to a stop, smoke pouring from under the hood. Nancy and Barbara were screaming, but not with laughter this time. Nancy's face was pressed against the deployed airbag, and Barbara was trying to get her door open while still holding her phone. I walked outside slowly, savoring every second. Nancy stumbled out of the driver's seat, her bee-print dress torn at the shoulder, mascara running down her cheeks. Barbara followed, limping slightly and clutching her phone, like it was the most important thing in the world. "You!" Nancy shrieked, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "You did this on purpose." "I put up a mailbox," I said calmly. "You drove into it." "It's made of metal," Barbara wailed. "That's illegal." "Actually, it's perfectly legal," I replied. I checked with the city planning office. Got all the permits. Would you like to see them? Nancy's face turned purple. "You're going to pay for this! Our car is ruined!" "Your car is ruined because you drove it into my mailbox," I said, pulling out my phone to show them the video I'd just recorded. Again, just like the last 5 times. Except now I have an indestructible mailbox instead of a wooden one. By the time the police arrived, a small crowd had gathered. Officer Martinez, the same cop who'd told me this was a civil matter, took one look at the scene and shook his head. "Same mailbox situation?" he asked. "Same neighbor's new mailbox," I replied. Nancy tried to file a complaint about my booby trap, but Martinez wasn't having it. "Ma'am, you drove your vehicle onto his property and struck his mailbox. That's destruction of property and reckless driving." "But look what it did to our car," Barbara protested. "Yeah," Martinez said, writing in his notepad. "That's what happens when you hit immovable objects at high speed. Basic physics." The insurance company was even less sympathetic. When I sent them the footage, they denied Nancy's claim within 2 hours. "Intentional collision," the agent explained over the phone. "Not covered under any circumstances." The repair estimate for the beast came to over $12,000. The vehicle was totaled, but the real victory came later that week, when the story went viral. Barbara had posted her heavily edited version on social media, trying to make me look like some kind of maniac who'd set a trap for innocent drivers. But my unedited footage, complete with audio of them planning the attack, told a very different story. Within 48 hours, it had been shared thousands of times with captions like, "Karen meets immovable object," and "When mailbox revenge goes perfectly." Someone even made a remix video set to dramatic music with slow-motion replays of the impact and reaction shots of Nancy and Barbara's shocked faces. The twins tried to rally support in the neighborhood, going door to door with their story about the dangerous mailbox and the psychopath who'd built it. But by then, everyone had seen the videos. Everyone knew the truth. Mrs. Henderson from the HOA called me personally to apologize. "We should have taken action sooner," she admitted. "This could have been avoided if we'd addressed their behavior from the beginning." The HOA board held an emergency meeting and issued formal violation notices to Nancy and Barbara for repeated property damage, harassment, and conduct detrimental to the community. They were fined $500 and put on probation. Any further incidents would result in legal action and possible forced sale of their property. Nancy lost her job. Apparently, her employer didn't appreciate having a viral video of their customer service manager committing vehicular vandalism circulating on the internet. Barbara's attempts to start a GoFundMe for victims of mailbox terrorism raised exactly $37, most of which came from anonymous donors making jokes about driving lessons. The beast was towed away on a Tuesday morning, leaving an oil stain on their driveway that lasted for months. Nancy and Barbara bought a used Honda Civic to replace it, but they never drove it anywhere near my mailbox. In fact, they seemed to go out of their way to avoid my entire property. The story had a life of its own online. I started getting messages from people all over the country who dealt with similar situations. Someone in Texas sent me photos of their own steel mailbox that had survived 3 separate attacks. A woman in Florida shared security footage of vandals breaking their hands, trying to smash her concrete-embedded post. But the best message came from my next-door neighbor, Mr. Peterson, who'd watched the whole saga unfold from his kitchen window. That was the most satisfying thing I've seen in 40 years of living in this neighborhood, he said. Those two needed to learn that actions have consequences. 6 months later, Nancy and Barbara are still my neighbors, but they're different people now. Quieter, more careful. They still wear matching outfits, but gone are the bright florals and cartoon prints. Now it's all muted colors and humble patterns, like they're trying to blend into the background instead of standing out. They never look at me directly anymore. When they see me checking the mail or working in the yard, they quickly look away and hurry inside. The few times we've encountered each other at neighborhood events, they've been almost polite, subdued. My mailbox still stands exactly where I built it, unchanged and unbothered. Sometimes I catch kids in the neighborhood touching it, testing its sturdiness, asking their parents about the famous mailbox that stopped the Karen sisters. It's become something of a local landmark. The whole experience taught me something important about dealing with bullies. Sometimes the authorities won't help you. Sometimes the official channels fail. Sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands and build something so solid, so unmovable that the problem solves itself. Nancy and Barbara thought they could push me around because I seemed like an easy target. They thought I'd keep replacing wooden mailboxes forever, absorbing their abuse and making excuses for their behavior. They were wrong. My steel mailbox stands as a monument to the simple truth that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. They chose to make my mailbox their target, and in the end, it became their downfall. Sometimes the best defense isn't fighting back. It's building something so strong that anyone who attacks it destroys themselves in the process. And you know what? I haven't had a single problem with my mail delivery since. If you enjoyed this tale of mailbox justice and Karen comeuppance, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories where bullies get exactly what they deserve, and ring that notification bell so you never miss the moment when justice finally arrives. Trust me, there are plenty more stories where this came from.